Hello and welcome to another podcast, Life as We Know It. This podcast is designed for women to feel inspired by normal conversations and things that are happening to us in every day, and also to talk to our champions and our menopause pros that sit on our round table and talk to them about what's happening in their lives when it comes to menopause, but actually just life in general, because menopause, we know, spans every aspect of our lives. It touches our relationships, our finances, it touches our employment, our health, our children, our partners, and so on. So I'm delighted to be chatting with Lorraine Sherrard, who's one of our menopause champions, but she's also a member of our Menopause Pro Roundtable Initiative. Hello, Lorraine, lovely to see you.
Good morning from a drizzly West Sussex, and I'm quite glad to see the rain.
Oh, yes, yes, we've got a bit of rain coming here too. So, just wanting to have a very nice chat, although I'm sure in places it won't be so nice because there's always an uncomfortable element to menopause for most of us. But I want to talk to you quite openly about what life has been like for you since you learnt that you were menopausal, how you learnt you were menopausal, and what actually happened to you.
Well, if we go right back to when I discovered I was menopausal, I had not long turned 50, so I had no symptoms really prior to turning 50 that I was aware of. And it was a period of life that my son had gone away to do his gap year, so I was experiencing that empty nest. And that separation from him. He's my only son. I have two stepkids, but they didn't live with us full time. So him going off and spreading his wings was a big thing for me. And I also was coming off the back of some grief, having lost my father a couple of years previously. And I found myself in a position where I didn't know what was going on in my head, mainly. I was having some very black thoughts, crying at, the most silliest thing, driving along the road thinking, what's going on with me? This is not me. I'm normally a very active person. I lost my motivation, and just having these very strange thoughts. So I went to see the doctor, and I am very lucky. I have a very good GP, and he immediately said, "Oh, let's test your hormones." And I thought, all right, okay, that's good, because I'm 7 years down the line now, so I'm in my late 50s, shall we say mid 50s. And at that point, I was like, all right, okay, fine, go ahead, do the tests. And a few days later, he rang me to tell me my results. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry because I was like, what? I'm in menopause. What are you talking about? You know, because I'd come from a stage in life where nobody was talking about menopause. My friends weren't talking about it, that I was exercising on a weekly basis. My sister wasn't talking about it. I lost my mother in my early 20s, so I hadn't got that the mother figure to talk to about my feelings and where I was in life. So I was very much lost at the time. I was like, oh, okay, fine. Well, what now? And he immediately said, he suggested some estrogen and HRT, and I willingly went on the journey with HRT, and I really haven't looked back. At the time, I also found when I was speaking to my sister or my sister-in-law or friends, a lot of my family, that support network are in Ireland, and they were even a little bit further behind us here in the UK in talking about menopause and menopause symptoms. Um, and everybody sort of looked at me strangely. I'm like, why are you doing that? And I started questioning then why there wasn't more information out there.
It's really interesting listening to you because there's a few things I've picked up from that. One is that you were 50 before you realised you were menopausal, and then you were quite surprised that you were menopausal at 50. So sort of, begs the question, how old did you think that you needed to be menopausal? Which, of course, that old state of mind that we had was that this was an old lady thing.
Yeah.
And even at 50, we feel as if we're too young to be menopausal, when actually you and I both know now, years later, we know all this information that the evidence that shows that you're moving into perimenopause in your late 30s.
Yes.
And so many women, this will resonate with so many women only finding out when they're 50. And of course, part of the work and a lot of the work that we do is trying to educate women earlier, because the more prepared you are, the more prepared your body is, the easier the transition.
Yeah.
You're always going to have those sort of peaks and troughs. So you're going to have these areas of, high emotions and then, some physical symptoms, or not everybody has physical symptoms. But I know that so many women that I've spoken to, when they're diagnosed or when they realize that they are menopausal, they first realize they're menopausal, perhaps in their 50s, they can look back and trace back some of those symptoms which they did not associate with menopause, because they would have just thought it was part and parcel of being perhaps in their 40s. It might have been that their periods became heavier or irregular, and you just put that down to your periods, not anything else. So were there times in your 40s that you now can link back to being perimenopausal?
Well, when I look back, I didn't have the lack of bleeding because I was on a coil and I didn't bleed. So I wasn't expecting, and I didn't recognize this "you're no longer bleeding" issue. But when it comes to I would wake up at night. I never had hot flashes. I'm more of a night sweat person, and I just used to put it down to a hot night, a clammy night. And we always have slept with fans in our bedroom because my partner likes some white noise. So I just didn't put it down to menopause. And as I say, so many people were talking about menopause, and then suddenly, Davina McCall was on the TV talking about menopause, and the fantastic documentaries that she did 5 or 6 years ago now, and how suddenly there was more talk around the symptoms. And I was starting to see friends, and friends were saying, oh yes, well, I'm taking such and such a estrogen and progesterone tablet to help my sleep. I was like, okay, right. And I started to investigate more and educate myself. And the books that I was drawn to, I found a very, very good book in the beginning called Estrogen Matters. And sort of devoured that. And then other books like The Happy Menopause, The Menopause Wellbeing by Nikki Williams, and who approached menopause with a much more holistic way. So I was reading from both angles, the medical side and more holistic, and educating myself. Because everybody was around me were going, oh, sure, what are you talking about menopause for? And I'm like, but it's happening, What are your
And then you found us and did your
Yeah,
very, very comprehensive
yeah.
training, of
Then
course.
I found the menopause experts group and brought that into my work, and more into how I, as a HR, and my background is in human resources, so I started to see clients asking for more information about menopause, and people, ladies in the workplace that were struggling. They may have been requesting flexible working, and it was around the reasons they were requesting flexible working. And then I found the menopause experts group and did the training and qualified, I think 2023, I
Yeah,
became
that was
menopause
quite a while ago
champion.
now.
So yeah, and I've just incorporated everything I've learned through the training with Meg into my work and advising clients, and it becomes more a natural thing than this is what we do, you need to do it. It's about understanding when a client comes to me and they have somebody on long-term sickness, why have you got long-term sickness, and what age is the person, is it menopause, and get the manager to ask the right questions and to support the person in the workplace. So yes, I've just organically really included it in my work.
I think some people think that knowing about menopause is actually quite easy.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that it is such a broad topic, and
Mm-hmm.
there is so much to learn about it. I saw a headline only this week, actually, which frustrated me because the headline, oh, this was on social media. The headline was, I thought I might have been menopausal, bearing in mind this woman was 48 years old. I thought I might have been menopausal, but then I found out it was just a vitamin deficiency. That's a terrible, terrible headline
Yeah.
because actually, as we know, when you're menopausal, the chances of you having vitamin deficiency is really high.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that article was completely misleading,
Yeah.
but wanted to kind of shove away the conversation, the topic of menopause, and just focus more on the deficiency, when actually it's all completely linked. You know,
Everything. Yeah. And then I came across somebody in their early 60s that had got diagnosed with osteoporosis. And I had a conversation with them. And at the time I said, oh, what has the doctor put you on? And are they looking at your estrogen levels and HRT? And again, that person, this is like 4 or 5 years ago before I did the MEG training. And they said, oh no, I wouldn't take HRT. And I was like, but why not? If it's going to help you in your day-to-day life, and together with lifestyle changes, your exercise regime, we all, I'm very much my lifestyle. I go to the gym, I run, I'm a very active person. So my bone health is very important to me, and that I'm able to do strength training. Like I'm not lifting huge weights, but I'm doing enough for me and to keep my body um, doing the right things for me, and encouraging within my groups that I exercise with. We now talk about it more when people have a sprain or a strain, what they're doing and how their menopause, and some people will say, oh, well, I'm out of the menopause now. And I'm like, well, really? I'm not sure you are out of the menopause. But
yeah, you're never out.
that's another conversation.
You're in for life. That's it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. We're talking about strength training, strengthening our bodies and actually our muscles as well, because obviously it's got to sustain this skeleton now for a long time, sometimes many decades if we're lucky. But it's interesting that modern day that we're needing to look at this supplementation of either diet or exercise. And when we look historically at our mothers, their mothers, of course, they were so active. When I think about my mother's life in particular, because I didn't have a grandmother that I can look back on, but when I look at Mum's very long life until she died at 93, she was active
Mm,
until probably 90.
yeah.
She always grew her own vegetables. She was always in the garden. She was a nurse, so she was always on her feet. Sometimes she would run 2 or 3 jobs alongside each other because she was a single parent for a long time, bringing up us as kids. And her lifestyle, and of course, she wasn't subjected to a huge amount of processed foods because that generation just weren't. So those ultra processed foods weren't leaching at her bones. And although she had a hip replacement at 80, actually, being diagnosed with some osteoporosis at 80 is much more normal than being diagnosed at 60 with
Yeah.
osteoporosis. And so you can see that our lifestyle has changed so much over the last 40 or 50 years. It's unrecognizable
Mm,
to our mothers and their mothers' lifestyle, and even the conveniences in the home.
yeah.
So Mum would have been washing the windows herself using vinegar and newspaper, as they did in those days. They weren't using the toxic chemicals that we buy off the shelf in the supermarket to wash our windows, if we're washing our windows at all, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're affluent, you have a window cleaner in. We can look back over the decades and think they weren't even using vacuum cleaners because most of the houses weren't even carpeted.
No.
They would have been tiled and swept.
Lino.
Or lino, yeah, or rugs that they would have then got outside once or twice a year, beaten the rug, and cleaned that way. So there was they didn't need the gym
No.
because there was this huge amount of physical activity that was going on in the home. And we walked everywhere when we were children as well, because mum didn't have a car of her own. So if we needed to walk into the village, we lived very rurally. If we needed to walk into the village, we would walk. As small children, we'd be walking probably a mile or two, probably a mile, I would say. And so she was walking as an adult and walking a lot. It's interesting, isn't it, when you look at this, because you sort of think, why do we need to go to the gym? Why do we have to have some weights at home? Why do we need to be doing all of these things? And it is intrinsically linked with our lifestyle now compared to a woman's life decades ago.
Absolutely. Like I have an 85-year-old neighbor, and like you're saying about your mom in the garden, like she is out in that garden every day. It might be in half an hour, it might be an hour at her age now, but she's there all the time and has always led that active life. My mother-in-law is 89. She's a farmer's wife. So you can imagine what that was like. But and your reflections of your mother, very similar to mine, home baking. Saturdays in our house we were home baking. Everything was made from scratch. The idea of my mother buying a cake was just alien. So we were very much brought up with making our own, and that's what I still do today. Yes, we all have take the shortcuts now and then, and I'll have some processed food in the house, obviously, but the majority of the meals that I make are from scratch. And
Yeah.
putting just good ingredients in there and then there's less additives, less sugar, less salt.
I think a lot of women struggle with feeling motivated to cook from scratch, particularly if you've not been brought up that way. So it's not ingrained in your psyche, but also there's a time element, and I think that if we're not expecting everybody to be cordon bleu chefs. You don't have to be.
No.
It's just mindfully thinking about how you're pulling your meals together and what you're actually putting into your mouth, and actually reconditioning our thoughts on food. Because a lot of us, of course, have been brought up post-war. Everything was then about 3 square meals a day. And I mean, now just 3 meals a day, I just think, how am I going to eat 3 meals? How would I physically eat 3 meals a day? I absolutely could not. But they would have been 3 small meals, very small meals a day. And we can see it's shifted so much the other end of the scale. And then we see this huge amount and the obesity crisis that we've got, but a lot of that is linked to ultra processed foods, of course. But our portion control has been completely lost. And so even at three meals a day, even my mother would say, you've got to eat every 4 hours. Her generation eat every 4 hours, but she would have eaten a very, very small amount of food every 4 hours, which kept her very fit and active and gave her all the nutrients that she need. But it's interesting. We have to change the way that we think, and all the things that we think we know.
Yeah.
And we don't. We've got to undo it all, haven't we, and unpick it.
And there's those like busy moms, and I've helped clients that are very, very busy, and they say, well, I haven't got time. And I'm like, you need to find the little time for you at times, whether that's just a 15-minute walk around the block once a day, and slowly build it in. Yes, you have. I had kids at home, 3 kids sometimes at weekends, and but I've always built in that little bit of me time to go to Pilates or to go for my walk. And it's not about, that's not self-centered or selfish. That's just being a little bit more self-aware of what you need as a person, because then you can give to the rest of the family when you've had that little reset.
Now, there's nothing wrong with being selfish. I mean, I think that the negative connotation to being selfish, I don't quite know where that came from. But unless we're actually looking after ourselves, we're not in a position to look after everybody else. And so, if you're not taking care of yourself, it means that you are more likely to break.
Mm-hmm.
At the most fragile time, actually, when our hormones are doing all sorts of things. We're walking, talking hormones. We have hormonal issues burbling and bubbling along throughout our lives as women. It's a constant ebb and flow. So that's why hormonal education is so critical to looking after ourselves. And it's been very widely ignored. But most of us, I mean, you and I are the same age, most of us will feel the knowledge that we've now gleaned in our 50s, we wish we had in our 30s, and we would have made different choices.
A lot of difference. And, and also like in my own personal journey with the menopause, I'm now 18 months post full abdominal hysterectomy. So that was another huge milestone for me to have that loss of losing, the womb being taken away during this journey. But again, I've had to have a mindset reset my own mind and look after my own mental well-being and accepting that and the new person that I've become post hysterectomy.
Yeah, let's talk about hysterectomy, because hysterectomy is, I mean, it's something that I've managed to avoid, and I don't know how I've managed to avoid it, because I have adenomyosis, which I've only just been recently diagnosed with. But actually, now with the diagnosis, I can completely see that I've had it all my life, pretty much. And I should have had a hysterectomy. And there were times in my life when I did think I probably need to push for a hysterectomy, but however I managed to, I managed to push through without it, by luck, I think, or by chance. But hysterectomy, especially a radical hysterectomy, if you've had everything removed, including your ovaries, you are then into post-menopause from day one. And of course, we hear conversations, stories from women all the time who the preparation for a hysterectomy is basically based on the amount of bleeding, blood loss, the pain they're in. Let's whip it all out. The pros, there are pros and cons to this. I mean, the pros is that you're not going to experience womb cancer. You're never going to have ovarian cancer. You're not going to have. You may not even experience cervical cancer. Okay, so it removes a lot of female cancer risk. So that's a tick, I suppose. Yeah. But I also feel that we have a mentality, particularly in the UK, for women, that if something's not working, we just whip it out. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes as research and development is growing all the time. And I was messaging the champions only this week saying, let's not be rigid in our views on this, because there are things that we think we know now that in a few years' time we'll be doing U-turns on, because we'll be thinking, well, actually, it's a bit like the contraceptive pill. None of us that were on a contraceptive pill, probably from our teens, in our generation, none of us would have thought that it was doing us any harm. In fact, we wouldn't have had any education or any knowledge that it was hormonal. We just wouldn't have known, because it would have been more about not getting pregnant, right? The contraceptive side. When actually we know now, there's a lot more research that if you're on the pill long term, of course, that's playing havoc with your hormones, because your hormones are going to be out of balance because you're having this extra synthetic. So It's all a learning curve, isn't it? Constantly, we don't stand still with this conversation.
No, not at all. Like the hysterectomy for me was, yeah, it was a big decision. It was, yeah, obviously like staring, you know, because of excessive bleeding in the run up. And my life, I had to weigh up my life then, the things that I like to do, the things that this excessive bleeding was stopping me doing. And yes, there were alternatives, an ablation, but there's no guarantee how long that would last for, and you may have to would have had to probably go back by now to have another one. So yeah, and you spoke about the cancers. And when I got a second opinion, the doctor said, Lorraine, you're taking away the risk of 5 cancers here. And I was like, okay, you've hit the nail on the head for me there, because I did lose a very, very dear friend to ovarian cancer. And my mother had a hysterectomy in her 40s. I've since found out my aunt, who's 91, she had one in her 40s in Ireland. And as you say, it was a case, I think, then for them that was the 70s, that it was whipped out.
Yeah.
And I don't remember my mother being on HRT. I think they were just left to it, back then. Whereas I've had amazing support from my GP and alternative therapies as well that I invest in just to help me with that journey. And we are more aware of, as you say, about the pill and endometriosis and other issues that to do with fertility and those hormone imbalances. But we've mentioned, the toxic chemicals that we're now using in our homes that our parents didn't have. There's some correlation to the chemicals and the disruptives that they make on our bodies today. And again, it's something where we should try and adopt more natural products in our homes and what we put on our skin.
Oh, it is something that really, really makes me think very difficult thoughts of decades of our generation having chemical exposure actually in the home through cleaning solutions that we would have used, that we actually should have been wearing full PPE gear to use. And I don't know any of my friends that would have ever been doing that. And so we would have had decades of exposure to these toxins.
Absolutely. And, and just even to the candles that we're burning in our home.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that the chemicals in those candles, and you're breathing that in. I use a very good app, and I scan the products that I want to put on my skin to see what's in them, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say.
Yes.
And that's where I make my choices now.
Yes, I think we just need to be more thorough in our choices, and I think that our age group, we can't go back in time. We can't undo some of the damage that's already been done. But what we can do is just make sure that we're not introducing more risk as we age, and that we understand more fully, as you say, what we're putting into our bodies and what we're putting on our faces and on our skin and what we're breathing in. And yeah, those the plug-in room air fresheners, the scented plugins, just don't use them. They're full of xenoestrogens and they're blocking our natural estrogen. So there's a lot to learn, which is why we offer such an incredible, vast training program, because we know that you can't just scratch the surface with this. You need to absolutely know what you're talking about. So tell me about the work that you're currently doing then and what you're involved in. I mean, I know that you're involved in our Menopause Pro Roundtable, which allows us to have more open conversations about topics and have an agenda that is geared towards a better understanding of women's health as a whole, and not just health, of course,
Mm.
money, law, which I know you're heavily involved in. So talk to me about what it is that you're actually doing.
Well, my background is in human resources. I've worked in human resources for 30 years now. Initially, the latter days, I was in the airline business and I was in the personnel department, as it was known as then. And then in the last 23 years, I've worked in employment law practice, and we provide advice business to business. So I'm working with clients now. And as I mentioned earlier, clients were starting to come to us and they were saying, we have this situation, this, with an employee. What would your advice be? And the more we looked, the more you scratch the surface, and the conversations were starting to happen around menopause and wellness in the workplace. That's one of the reasons that I trained with Meg, because the training is so good, and it gave me the information and the research that has been put behind all the training in Meg to go with confidence into an employer's situation and train them on how to become menopause friendly workplaces. And sometimes that's whether that's full training from the managers and from the top down, or whether it's having a lunch and learn over, with those in the business who are responsible for the wellness and the equality in the workplace. So there's lots of different angles when it comes to the training and what clients feel is the right fit for them. But clients are more aware, and obviously because of now the Employment Act changes, there is more of a need, and the employers are recognizing that they do need to support the female workforce and educate the managers who are working with everybody. It's not just about, I always saying, it's not just about the women aged 45 to 60 that are working with you. It's about the person sitting next to the woman who's 45 to 60 and how they can support that person in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, just the vast amount of money that companies are losing by losing this incredible wealth of knowledge that you can never replace. Someone's got 20, 30 years of experience. You cannot replace that person overnight. And the cost of recruitment, we know, per head is far more than the cost of any menopause training or any support that you can put into the workplace. So it's an educational piece, isn't it?
The knowledge that, those women have through their various stages of their career to where we are, you and I, at our age, and what we have in our experience and working up within our roles in the different businesses, and how we can, share that with those that are coming through.
Yeah.
It's invaluable. It's invaluable.
Yeah. And we're watching a lack of, this skills shortage. We're watching this unfold. There's a complete middle sector now of skill shortages, and that's mostly because the people with skills have left the workplace, so they're not being able to hand down their skills and experience and knowledge to the next generation. And I find that a real shame. Women in particular over the age of 45, 50, but there is so much knowledge there, so much experience that is just being lost. And so employers just need to open their eyes. Don't let it get to crisis point, because when you're at that point, you can't go back. You can't do anything about it very much. And there's this whole load of talent just going to waste. It's such a shame.
And it's important that the larger employers recognize, this is going to be mandatory by April 2027, that their managers and support mechanisms must be in place. And there has been a slow uptake on it, but I think as approach that deadline now, people are starting to realize, oh, we need to do something a little bit more now in readiness for next spring. It's not that far away. It's
No, and it's going to come around very quickly.
6 months away. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's really, really important that the training, the policies and the action plans are in place, and whether, us as champions and pros going in and working with the client to do that training, or directing somebody within those larger businesses to come to Meg and have their own in-house person in that business. If you're
Yes, have a
employing,
nominated,
yeah, if you're
nominated champions in the workplace.
if you're an employer of 500 plus staff, why wouldn't you have your own nominated champion in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone who's listening to this, put some pressure on your employer. Perhaps even share this video or snippets of it, because it's really your voice that matters. And interestingly, when we talk about menopause at work, we always sort of initially think about women that are working in offices, that it's more clerical based, when actually we've got so many, it's so much broader than that. You're looking at women in the police force, women in the armed services, women on the factory floor, women in industry across all sectors. It's not just those women that are office-based, clerical, need a fan or a window open, or the remote control to the air conditioning. That's not what we're talking about. It's much, much broader than that.
Much broader. It's a bit harder to in the supermarket. Does the lady have a fan under her desk? She may have an extra bottle of water, but it's thinking about the uniforms and how are they breathable fabrics, adjustments in it like that, or adjusting shifts if somebody's suffering from bad lack of sleep because of their menopause symptoms. Maybe they just need to be cut some slack for a little while, and they have a little adjustment to those shifts, whether it be coming in a later time, and working in the middle part of the day rather than those early starts.
I often think about nurses or care workers, those in those situations where their shifts are long. Sometimes they can be 12 or 14-hour shifts. And some of the symptoms that I've experienced, but particularly the period symptoms, flooding, unexpected flooding, just being caught short generally, you sort of think, I was lucky because I've worked for myself for a very long time, and therefore a lot of the time over the last 10 years I've worked from home. And so I've been lucky enough to be able to support myself and get myself out of certain situations, and make myself more comfortable. But actually, when you're on a long shift,
you can't.
You don't have that. You just don't, do you? Yeah. And if you're suddenly flooding and you're a nurse on a ward, what do you do? And I quite often think, what happens to these women that are in the midst of all of that? And inevitably, if it's that bad, they will have to go home.
Yeah, or they'll say, I can't do this job anymore.
Yeah.
Can't do this job anymore.
It's an endless conversation to be had. And, it's very interesting to get your insights on it, because, of course, that's what you're doing and eat, sleep, breathing every day in the workplace. And so it's nice to be able to have that conversation and just open up the thought patterns for other people thinking about other women in different industries or across healthcare and what they might be experiencing. And if you are a leader in this, then you need to take action, support those people that you lead as well as yourself.
Because if a conversation starts in the workplace about somebody's capability, for instance, if someone was, they're suffering from a little brain fog, maybe they're not meeting their deadlines or other issues within the workplace, and you're looking at a capability process. And we have seen in our work menopause being mentioned later in the process, and then you're sending the employee to occupational health, and occupational health is then saying, well, this is the support you need to put in place for this person, you know, whether it be that they're in a uniform job, a shift job, or a 9 to 5. There will always be a few adjustments that can be actioned to keep and to support the person, because if the person leaves and they say it's to do with their age or a disability, and then it comes back round that it was menopause cited, those claims are going up, and we're seeing menopause mentioned more and more in claims going forward, because women are more aware now as well because of the conversations. They're more aware of their rights, and that is correct.
I think just being a caring employer as well, looking at a woman's life, and so many things hit us actually just as we're going through menopause, whether that's looking after elderly relatives, or whether it's the kids leaving home or coming back, whether it's some other challenge. It might be financial, and it could be that she's just really not sleeping well, disturbed sleep through the night, so she's absolutely exhausted through the day. It's understanding, I think. Start to understand. Let's invest in people more. I don't buy into this work life, home life scenario. I've always said it's life. It's not work or home. It's life, and everything has an impact on everything else. And so I think as employers, we need to just be a little bit more interested, a little bit more invested in actually how that person is coping, feeling, thinking, rather than just assuming that, oh, it's menopause and therefore she can't cope. Well, it may be that she's actually managing her menopause quite well, but it's the other aspects of life that is causing some disturbance here. So, give her a
And
break.
that's why the managers and other staff need to be also trained in how to recognize and support their colleagues.
Yes, because we don't want to be whinging and moaning at work, right? We don't want to go to our line manager and have to explain everything. But we do need to feel that we can go to our line manager and actually feel as if that person does care about actually how I'm feeling today and what I might be going through. And it's not necessarily that someone is a malingerer, okay? Because quite often, that thought process can go through an employer's mind, is that, goodness me, this person's always sick, or they've always got a drama going on. There's always something going on in their lives. And that's what I mean by being much more invested and interested, not nosy, but in a more caring way, that we look after our employees and not just see them as people who come in and do a task, we pay them and they go home.
Yeah, and it's part of the bigger picture of the wellness of everybody in your workplace. Because somebody could be having fertility treatment and they need that little extra slack as well. At the other end of the scale, or other appointments with regard to menstrual cycle or other, that everybody is treated equally and fairly and kindly. We're all kind to each other. And that's why it's menopause friendly workplace.
Yes, being kind goes a long, long way.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating talking to you. We could absolutely talk about this all day long. But I really appreciate your time today, Lorraine, and we'll see you again, and I'll certainly see you around the round table.
No, and thank you. It's great to be around the round table and meet the other experts as well, from time to time, and what changes are happening. So yeah, it's been a great chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.